night before, the night of the 16th, because the Union First Corps has moved in just behind you on the other side of the woods. I know a lot of folks have been here for years coming out, but the North Woods is really starting to look like something. This whole area was a wooded area all the way down and over the Hagerstown Turnpike. We've had 20,000 volunteers plant 40,000 trees in the park. They started here pretty early. It's really starting to, right here there's a couple open patches, but I'll tell you what, you go over that hill, it's really starting to fill in. It's really starting to look good. So on the other side of the North Woods, the Union First Corps moved in. General Joe Hooker, West Pointer, clean shaven. He'll ride a white Charger all day on the 17th. He's everywhere. I would argue that he was maybe the best Corps commander on the field until he's wounded and carried off. Does an exceptional job that morning, trying to turn the Confederate left flank. So the First Corps moves in the night before. They start crossing the Antietam in the early afternoon. I think we've determined that they actually beat Lee to the punch on the upper bridge. They get across there and they move in up here just behind you. I'm always going to stick with pretty round numbers just because I'm comfortable with that. I'd say about 8,000 men. They're going to move in back behind you there. It was a miserable, terrible, cold and rainy night. Everybody is soaked. No one has protection from that. Now, Hooker and George Meade will spend the night in the barn behind you, back on the Poffenberger farm. We put a tremendous amount of work into this farm. If you want to see what a farmstead looked like on this field in 1862, that's a great example. So they're going to move in the night before. It's raining. I just read a letter home the other day of one of these units that crossed over, New York unit. They marched a little, late in the evening. They're about half lost. They end up here on the north end, and the commander just said, let's just stop here. And they ended up in a freshly manured field. And it's pouring down rain. And they're not allowed to have a fire. And that's your last night on Earth.
Where is it? Were they beyond the farm, north of the farm?
All in and around it.
Okay.
Most of the artillery moves in on the high ground, just on the north side of the barn. The First Corps is there. Some of the units we're going to cover are basically all in and around the farm, all over it, basically.
Within sight of where we're standing.
Yeah, inside.
Right over here.
You look right there; they'd all be right there. The 12th Corps will move in, kind of back to their back left, back that direction. The 12th Corps moves in, Mansfield. So about 15,000 soldiers cross the upper bridge and fords the night before and move in up here on the north end. And the whole idea was they're not going to attack uphill, do a direct assault onto the Confederate line. They're going to turn their flank. That's how battles are fought. I've talked tactically how they're fought, but in the big picture, really, it's just about hitting the flanks. Every battle of the war is fought trying to hit the flanks. And so they're going to move in up here on the north end to attack the left flank of the Confederate Army. And to do that, they're going to go that way, which is what we're going to do. One of the things that Brian and I love to do is kind of share some of the words of the men that were here. They were here, we were not. They can tell you better than we can. Here's just a couple from the early morning. It was in the gray of early morning when the sergeant major, walking rapidly along the line of sleeping men, awakened us with a gruff voice to roll call. I arose with a feeling of numbness in my left side, caused by the pressure of my cartridge box against it all night. For we had slept accoutered for battle, which we were certain would occur at daylight. Even as the roll was being called, the musket fire of the picket lines commenced quite briskly. Looking along the line, I saw the men wiping the moisture from their muskets, for the dew had been heavy, and just now there was a considerable fog. The premonitions of battle were growing stronger. The symptoms of an impending battle had been apparent for more than 24 hours, and we knew that the culmination of another great tragedy was at hand. These men know what's going to happen. They know. Now, you have a lot of brand new soldiers on this field, on the Union side especially, but these men know. The Union artillery moves in 30, 35 guns, primarily on the north side of the barns, up on that high ground. Albert Monroe's out there. We were awakened before daylight by the cook, who had brought up a pail of steaming coffee and Johnny cakes. Sounds pretty good right now, doesn't it? The officers gathered on their haunches as the early gray light that appeared just before the sun rises over the horizon. We could little more than distinguish each other. We had not half finished our meal, and we could see the first rays of the sunlight lighting up the distant hilltops. when there was a flash and the air around us seemed to be alive with shot and shell from the enemy's artillery. The opposite hill seemed suddenly to have become an active volcano belching forth flame and smoke. The artillery will open the day on September 17th. There were 520 cannons on this battlefield, fired over 50,000 rounds of ammunition. I mean, in the time we've been standing here, there's probably already been a couple hundred rounds fired. I mean, that's the thing that you can't get a sense of. You know, we would never be able to communicate like this once this thing starts. We'd be screaming at each other the whole time. So, the artillery opens. Probably the first shot comes off of Nicodemus Heights. Most of you have been here, but the highest trees over there to your right is Nicodemus Heights. That's the farthest northern end of the Confederate Army. The Potomac River is just behind that. That's the left end of the line. It's kind of anchored on a big bend in the Potomac. Half of the Confederate cavalry is up there. Fitzhugh and about half of the cavalry. John Pelham is there with his horse artillery. We've heard a lot of different numbers. The number I use is 14 cannons. Somewhere 12 to 15 guns are up there on Nicodemus Heights. Probably the first shot of the day comes off of Nicodemus Heights into the Union men that are gathering for battle just behind us. One of those first rounds strike directly into one of the units that we are going to follow this morning, the 6th Wisconsin. It actually explodes in a thrashing machine. Wounds 11, kills 2. One of the soldiers has his arms ripped off. One of the captains has his foot torn off. Captain Noyes has his foot ripped off. Good morning. Welcome to the Battle of Antietam. Those men are going to gather and push south. We're going to follow them headed south. Doubleday's guns start to answer back. So at the first moments of this battle, the first light of the day, there is artillery screaming across that sky in front of you. Counter battery fire back and forth. Joe Hooker, first thing he does is push 2 batteries south in preparation. He's going to have his artillery, a modern parlance would be, to prepare the battlefield. He's going to push 2 batteries south. We're going to follow them. You can see where they go. It's just as obvious as can be. Look at that ridge line there. I mean, and those men are going to help lead the advance with the 1st Corps. 1st Corps, 8,000 men, is going to lead the assault. And they have 2 divisions up, 1 in reserve. And we're about in the middle of that, I think. We're about in the middle of the 2-division assault south. Better start walking here pretty soon. I just keep going. I got something. But we've got 2 divisions headed south. We got Doubleday's division on the right, Ricketts' division on the left. We're about at the division seam, if you will, or line as they head south. We're maybe a little bit more on the Doubleday side. And then Meade's in reserve. 2 up, 1 back. You got 2 divisions headed south. Doubleday, Ricketts, Meade in reserve, headed towards the high ground where the visitor center sits today, aiming towards the Dunker Church. That's really the tactical point of objective, is that high ground. They're all headed that way early in the morning. Just one last thing I'll share before we kind of head south and start talking this detail out. When Joe Hooker went into the barn that night, pretty late in the evening as he finally got settled in, he looked at his men, or looked at his staff and said, "Tomorrow we will fight the battle to decide the fate of the Republic." So every step you take from here to the Dunker Church, every step you take is going to decide the fate of the Republic. Watch your step on the corn road. South, how your view just changed dramatically. I had a question on the way down about it was all open from the North Woods all the way to the Dunker Church, going that way. Which way do you find your head?
This was probably plowed right about through here, and then it was pasture, and then it was pasture, and then plowed, and then woods.
So pasture to the north fence of the cornfield, which we can see now. Pasture. We just came across a plowed field. And you got to think in your mind now what that would be like. I don't know if any of y'all have ever walked in a plowed field. That's not an easy thing. You got those old terrible shoes on. You're pretty daggone nervous. Your mouth's dry. You don't know what's coming up here. You're already under severe artillery, especially once you got here. We're in range and in view of the long range, whatever rifle guns are down there. You can see the visitor center kind of peeking out. There's 19 cannons there that start firing towards us the moment we get to here. So we're really under fire now because we're also getting that flanking fire from Nicodemus. A lot of discussion, a lot of research there about how long Nicodemus, those guns were there. I'd say an hour.
45 minutes.
45 minutes to an hour. So for the first 45 minutes of this battle, you're getting raking, flanking artillery fire well within range from Nicodemus. So those guns will eventually be pushed off by the counter battery of Hooker's men. But all they do is just slide down the ridge line and get onto Hauser's Ridge on the west side of the West Woods. We'll talk about that a little bit this afternoon. We're here. This is where a lot of the initial artillery was. Up on this ridge line here, you can see our guns. I guess they're in the middle of the corn. We've got some guns up in here, but you can't see them. Oh, there's the wheel. There it is. Okay, I just put two cannons here. We just moved all the artillery around the battlefield this last year. There you can just see a piece of it. Two Pennsylvania batteries moved south. Matthews and Thompson, they each have 4 rifle cannons. And they're blasting the cornfield. Up on this little ridge line though that we're at during the day, interesting, there were 6 different Union batteries will basically be in this area. You can see it's all about terrain. And if you're going to study this map, you got to look at all these little knobs and knolls on the landscape. I can almost guarantee you on any piece of high ground there was artillery. 6 different Union batteries will take position here during the day. Get a little ahead of myself, but that's okay. 28 guns were up here, 6 batteries, 18 rifles, and 10 smooth bore up on this little plateau that we're standing on. They're going to blast the cornfield, the 2 Pennsylvania batteries. From the opening moments of this battle, things are not going well on the Union side. The commands are breaking down, the advancements are breaking down almost immediately. On your front right, we're about probably on the left side of Doubleday's advance. The Iron Brigade, John Gibbon commanding, got 3 brothers in the Confederate Army, 971 men. They're advancing south. We're kind of on their left. And on this side is Ricketts' division. Ricketts' division, I have a picture of it. Well, here's Abner Doubleday. He's on your right. Doubleday on your right. James Brewerton Ricketts is on your left. We're almost at the seam there, if you will. Things aren't going well. It's 3 brigades that are moving south. And the first brigade, the commander's wounded. General Hartsuff is wounded. There's some confusion there, some problems. Who's going to take over? Richard Coulter from Pennsylvania will take over the brigade. So that's causing a problem in that brigade. The other brigade is commanded by Colonel Christian. All this incoming artillery fire from front and flank, it's too much for him. Runs away. Your brigade commander. See ya. He's drummed out of the Army, dies in the insane sign. Peter Lyle's got to take over. So, in 2 of the 3 advancing brigades, things aren't going well. So, Duryea's brigade's going to go alone. So, we're actually kind of on their right as we advance south. Duryea's brigade is going to advance alone. They're at that fence at 5:45. They push through the cornfield. They arrive on the other side right about 6 a.m. 1,100 men. So we're kind of following them. Hartsuff's units get reorganized behind them, and they will push through about 30 minutes later. That's one of the units I'm really going to focus on this morning, just because I have a lot of great material. That's one reason. Also, it's just really interesting units. So Massachusetts, the 12th and the 13th. Here's just a couple words as they are trying to push south, trying to follow up on Duryea. A foggy morning with the 17th of September. Each army was astir and was preparing for the deadly struggle that the lowest private knew was to take place. Without building any fire to cook our coffee or anything else, simply eating our dry, hard bread, we were prepared for what was to come. The sun was coming up, it drove the fog away, and we were quickly in line, advanced out of the friendly shelter of the woods into an open field. Directly in our front, but a short half-mile away, was the rebel line of battle awaiting to receive us. The ridge behind their line was crowned by their batteries. I remember one planted near a church that opened fire on us as soon as we showed ourselves. So the guns near where the visitor center sit, there were 19 guns there. Colonel S.D. Lee will start firing in this direction. The guns here are firing in that direction. The guns on Nicodemus are firing in this direction. The long-range rifled guns on the other side of Antietam Creek, particularly the 20-pounders, the guns of position, are pounding the Confederates out there in front of you from a mile away on the other side of the creek. If you read the letters from those guys, that's what was really bothering them in the early morning, that long-range guns pounding their position. One of the soldiers on that end, Confederate, said, "The smoke rolled backward to the mountains, but the destructive shot and shell were falling on every foot of land. I doubt not that at one time there was a cannon firing at us to every 5 men we had defending. Now that's an exaggeration. If there was a cannon for every 5 Confederates, there'd be 8,000 guns over there. But if you're getting pounded by 20-pounders, you can't do anything about it. That's what it feels like. It feels like 8,000 guns. So the point I want to make to you is artillery is crashing in from all 4 directions. Here's the 12th Massachusetts. Thompson's battery that had followed close in our rear unlimbers and opens on them. Right here. That's what those guns represent. Other batteries in position open fire, but the enemy's fire does not slacken. Up again and onward, through the field to the heavy fence that bordered the memorable Cornfield, where later in the day the dead were literally piled up. Just then a shell struck the fence and exploded right in the midst of us. It seemed for a moment that all was chaos as dust splinters and smoke filled the air. It staggered us for only an instant. Rubbing our eyes, saw that most of us were still in fighting trim. Onward to the Cornfield. Or any complaints or any negative talk about how these guys should have gone this way, should have gone that way. Look how long it takes us to move 50 people 50 feet. It is a very difficult thing to maneuver on a battlefield, and we see it every time we hike. We got fences. Where's Jim? Sorry, we had to climb a fence over there. I just realized.
Yeah, I took it real easy this time.
Okay, thank you.
Last time I went over the fence, I broke his arm. So.
It didn't even hit me until I got on the other side. I said, "Oh my gosh, I'm taking Jim over fences." So, yeah, we got to.
No pole volley today.
Okay. Shoot. Just one thing I want to mention, because a lot of work's gone. A lot of people have been here 100 times, and there has been a lot of work going on, and we've really made some progress on the Miller house. The exterior stucco is just about done. The scaffolding will be off probably late fall. They're actually going to do a top coat. It's not paint. It's some kind of
whitewash, isn't it?
It's not whitewash, but it's something like that. I'm not an architect, but there's one more coat to go on there. The plaster itself was like 6 coats. They had, they built. You can't just put it on this thick. You got to. This was the style, and you can't see it from here, but during your visit this weekend, you can walk up and around. I mean, obviously the fence is there, but you can go up and look at it. It's actually scored. It's scored plaster to look like big granite blocks. That was the style of the period, to make you look like you were living in a big granite home. Arlington House is the same kind of technique, where you have these, looks like big granite blocks. It's a cheap way of basically making your house look much more impressive than what it is. We've been working on the Miller house for years. We're having to do it a piecemeal. But they've got the plaster done. We had a team come in, Park Service team, do that. So it's pretty exciting to see that finally coming to fruition. New roof. Just a lot of work going on. So it'll be open. I think the fencing and the stuff will be down this fall. Next spring or next year when you come out, it should be opened up. All those bushes are all coming out. They're part of the problem there. A couple of the trees are going to come out. Kind of clean that whole area up. So the house was obviously here the day of the battle. David R. Miller and his family, and the barn was here. In this field were a bunch of haystacks. Anybody has read anything about Antietam, they talk about the haystacks here on the south side of the barn where men were looking for cover. And we're going to kind of shift gears now back over to the Iron Brigade. So on the other side of the field, you got Duryea going in for the first 30 minutes, then Hartsuff and Christian eventually following in behind them. On this side is the Iron Brigade basically coming down the turnpike. The 6th Wisconsin is on that side of the road, and 7 companies and 3 companies are in the road and on this side. And then to their left would be the 2nd Wisconsin. The 19th Indiana and the 7th Wisconsin are actually going to move to the right over into the West Woods in this low ground. The fire from Nicodemus Heights and the maneuvering of Confederates, particularly Jubal Early and some others that are maneuvering over here and firing from this side. Some decisions are made by Hooker and Doubleday to try to push some forces to the front right as they advance south. Patrick's brigade will be pushed to the right. So there's units actually at this moment of the battle are pushing over into those woods, the northern end of what is called the West Woods. It's the northern end of the West Woods. And so 2 of the regiments in the Iron Brigade are moving in that direction, and Patrick's brigade is being sent over. Battery B is firing from near the Miller farm, and 2 guns are pushed south. Stewart's section moves up. We're going to go to their section here in just a little bit. Rufus Dawes is a major in the unit of the 6th Wisconsin. His boss, Lieutenant Colonel Edward Bragg, is wounded. He's wounded in the arm, and Dawes has to take over the unit. He has a tremendous account of this action on the right at Antietam. It's a great account. I'll share a couple of his comments because it really kind of talks about exactly where we are. So, before us was a strip of an open field, beyond which on the left side Before us was a strip of an open field. On the left hand side, a turnpike, rising ground covered by a large cornfield, stalks standing thick and high. So he's describing the turnpike, and then the cornfield right there. That's the northwest corner. This week, our farmers cut the corn in the cornfield. We weren't planning for that, but it happened. But that's what it's going to look like at the end of the day, but still high when he's seeing that at the first thing in the morning. The rebel skirmishers ran into the corn as we appeared at the fence. We climbed the fence, moved across the open space, and pushed on into the cornfield. They start taking incoming fire. I halted the left wing and ordered them to lie down on the ground. The bullets began to clip through the corn and spin through the soft furrows, thick almost as hail. Shells burst around us, the fragments tearing up the ground. The grape shot whistled through the corn above us. Colonel Bragg is wounded. Dawes says, with a great sense of responsibility, I took over. A great sense of responsibility. Now, one of the problems on the advance south was the units actually had to move. The 6th had to come through the Miller farmyard. There's an orchard, a garden, fences. You can start to get a sense of that when you look at the Poffenberger farm. We're going to try to get all that restored, but a farmyard is a complicated place to get through. And as they're moving through, one of the companies commanded by Edwin Brown is trying to get through the garden fence, and they actually try to tear it down. They can't get it torn down, so they basically just open up the gate to get through. Edwin Brown was from Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. He's like everybody. It's one of those guys everybody loved. He liked to sing. He kept the men's spirits up by singing in the evening. He had 3 kids at home. He was 30 years old. He wrote a letter home a couple days before the battle, talked about how we were chasing Jackson. And he closes the letter, love to all, kiss the babies for me. I have no time for more. Be a good girl and remember your husband. I will write more if I ever get the chance. As he's coming through the gate, he screams to his men, right by file into line. And when he screams line, a bullet goes through his mouth and kills him instantly. Colonel Bragg had to write home to his wife. He was a good soldier, a brave and chivalrous gentleman, and above all, he cherished a fond love for his home and the domesticities this cruel war has severed. Believe me, madam, the regiment deeply mourns his loss, and his brother officers will long cherish his memory, and through me express to you their kindest and heartfelt sympathies in your bereavement. This is something else we haven't, I don't know if we've ever done it. Where's Brian? I don't know if we've ever done this field. It's always been planted. It's the first time we've ever actually been able to follow Stewart's section up the line. So we're going to be crossing the fence, and we're going to meet right up here at Battery B, Stewart section, right up here. Opens. Utah. Okay. Battery B, 4th U.S., regular U.S. artillery battery. These guys, I don't know when they were formed. You know, it's 1821. See, that's why I got to bring my back up here. This is a regular U.S. Army battery, and at the beginning of the war, they're in Utah. They marched to Leavenworth to get onto the trains and then take the trains east. Okay, so people are responding to this field from Utah. The 2 men that had the greatest influence on this organization were John Gibbon, their original commander, and James Stewart, who leads this section. Batteries, 6 guns. He has 6 Napoleons, 3 sections, 3 section commanders. Stewart, who will take over the battery here and will lead it in the future. Those 2 guys are the ones that really made this battery. And Gibbon is a strict disciplinarian. His men were thankful for the training that he had given them before they got here. So those two men really led this battery. They're going to move up to support the infantry. That's what the artillery does. It provides support to the infantry. The first section moves up here. The other 4 guns will move up, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes later. The Confederates will try to counterattack, and they'll fire. Their line is basically, the front line on this side is Jackson's division. There's 2 Confederate divisions. We're going to talk about that some. On this side is Jackson's division. What's left of it, about 1,600 men, 4 brigades. On the other side of the turnpike is Alexander Lawton's division. Ewell's division. Ewell had his leg shattered at Second Manassas at the Bronner Farm. So Alexander Lawton, Harvard-educated lawyer, takes over the division. He's on that side. So Jackson's division, their initial line, 2 brigades, are right here firing the Battery B as soon as they get here. So a lot of incoming fire. And what really shocks the 6th Wisconsin and Battery B as they move up, trying to push through the corn, try to come down the turnpike. The men are literally kind of hugging the fences as they come down. Is almost immediately they get some fire from right here where this, right on the other side of that fence, you see kind of a scrubby line of trees. There's a rock ledge there. And there were some Virginians on that rock ledge, absolutely completely hidden with cover. A.C. Page is commanding, and they'll fire into these men at point blank range right from this right. There's also Confederates over in the north end of the West Woods that are firing from their right. And once again, that's why the 19th and the 7th get sent over there, because of the fire to the right. Some of it absolutely right here at point blank. They will force Page's Virginians out. They'll move back to the line. So 1,600 men at Jackson's division, 4 brigades. One of those brigades is commanded by a captain, and that's where Jackson's division was at the time. They're in very bad shape. Let's see. J.R. Jones is commanding. Here's what he said about the command. Regiments were commanded by captains and lieutenants, companies, and sergeants. Many of the men had shoes. Many went into battle barefooted. They were ragged, tired, hungry, but they were soldiers who had marched hundreds of miles during the summer and fought many battles under Jackson and Lee. And a little bit of hyperbole. On this field, they fought with a gallantry never surpassed and rarely equaled. Now, over in the Stonewall Brigade, E.E. Stickley said, the spectacle presented was, as this Union line advances, the spectacle now presented was one of splendor and magnificence. As the enemy advanced, we beheld one of the most brilliant displays of troops we'd ever seen. In double battle lines, the Federals were moving towards us at charge bayonet common time, and the sunbeams falling on their well-polished bayonets and guns made a glamour and a show fearful and entrancing. Here at Battery B, some of the words of the men that were here. It seemed almost incredible that any man could have escaped in the battery, working in the open field with veteran infantry under dense cover, sharpshooting at within 28 to 30 paces. Private Johnson said, it was as fierce and murderous a combat as ever surged around a 6-gun battery. Sergeant John Mitchell, was hurt when one of the guns ran over his legs. Sergeant Joe Herzog was shot into the bowels, pulled out a pistol, blew his brains out. Another quote from Battery B, during the time it raged here at the battery, it seemed that all the missiles of destruction were flying through the sulfur-laden atmosphere, screeching, hissing, howling, their discordant song of death. Anybody send a text like that? Their discordant song of death. These guys are incredible. The bugler, of course, I know everybody here probably knows the story of Johnny Cook. Their bugler, he's 15 years old. Oh, how was that for my timing? It was all planned. That gun is right where S.D. Lee's battalion was. So that's exactly what it would have sounded like. Well, it did a little louder with a full charge, but basically that's it. That's pretty good. Johnny Cook, Captain Campbell is wounded. They carry him, Cook takes him back towards the barn where they're gathering the wounded. He comes back, jumps in, helps service the battery, and I'm sure most of you know, later is awarded the Medal of Honor, 15 years old, one of the youngest Medal of Honor awardees ever. He said it was a sickening sight to see those poor maimed and crippled fellows crowding on top of one another while several stepping a few feet away were hit again and killed. John Gibbon actually rushes into the gun to help aim it as the guns were being fired and pushed back. The barrel had been run up. I jumped from my horse, rapidly ran up to the elevating screw until the muzzle pointed in the ground in front and nodded to the gunner to pull the lanyard. The discharge carried away most of the fence in front of it and produced great destruction in the enemy's ranks. The enemy got so close to the battery in his desperate attempts to capture it that the pieces were double-shotted with canister, from which whole ranks went down. And after we got possession of the field, dead men were found piled on top of each other. Another soldier said Gibbon and those 2 guns literally filled the air with fence rails, haversacks, guns, and limbs of the rebel soldiers. But the advance is still pushing to the south end of the corn. We're going to keep following that south. With Edwin Brown, shot in the mouth in the fence in front of you. There was a second Medal of Honor awarded at Battery B to William Hogarty, who loaded and fired a cannon by himself. Here's his, it's not the greatest image, but there's a sketch of William Hogarty. So 2 Medals of Honor at 1 battery in 1 action. Here's John Gibbon and Johnny Cook. He was a paper boy from Cincinnati. Buried in Arlington National Cemetery. Here's Rufus Dawes, 6 Wisconsin, who've been following south. Oop, gotta watch the reflection of that. If anybody wants to see any of these as we're going along, that's fine. We're just going to do a little bit more here to kind of finish up the action on this side of the cornfield. We're still in with the 6th Wisconsin, the 2nd Wisconsin's to the left. And one thing that, about this battlefield is there's this ridge line right here. Look, you can hardly see over the little hill there. It's almost like there's 2 separate battles going on. There's the battle over here on the east side of the cornfield with Ricketts' division, and then the fighting up here in Doubledays. It's almost really, the only way I've ever been able to make any sense out of it, and the terrain drives you that way, is 2 separate battles. You almost have to look at it that way because it's not necessarily all connected to each other. So the first to your right, the 1st brigade in was Abram Duryea's. His son is commanding a regiment on the south end of the field. He has 1,100 men. They're in combat for 30 minutes, and they lose 1/3. So they go it alone for the first half hour. And then right behind them comes Hartsuff Brigade. Richard Coulter has taken over. So this theme that you're hearing, if you want to understand the Union Army here, not necessarily planned or executed that way. It's very piecemeal. That's the word to describe it. It's one at a time. So to your front right, the 12th and 13th Massachusetts are coming in. Here's George Kimball with the 12th Mass. How terrible's a shock, our men go down. Screams and groans follow that first volley. We load and fire as rapidly as we can. Our officers cry, give it to 'em, boys. There's a pandemonium of voices, a roar of musketry, a storm of bullets. Shells are bursting among us continually. In the wild excitement of battle, I forget my fear and think only of killing as many of the foe as I can. A man a few paces from me is struck squarely in the face by a solid shot. Fragments of the poor fellow's head come crashing into my face and fill me with disgust. There's just a few of us left now. The enemy's line, which looked as magnificent as our own when we opened fire upon it, seems now as ragged as ours. Now this farm did not exist at the time, so you got to take all that away. That's just open pasture all the way back to the Dunker Church. Open pasture. Alexander Lawton's division. The 2 front brigades. Remember, 2 up, 1 back. The 2 front brigades. You have Douglas's brigade, Marcellus Douglas. He's taken over because Lawton moved up to division. 6 Georgia regiments. To his right, Isaac Trimble's brigade, who's commanded that day by James Walker. James Walker could have changed the entire course of the American Civil War before it ever even happened. Walker was a student at VMI. He had a very persnickety professor there. Walker got in a little trouble with Mr. Jackson, was expelled about 2 weeks from graduation. Not very happy. Goes up into the dormitory, takes a brick and throws it at Jackson's head. Missed him by about that much. If his aim was better, we probably wouldn't all be standing here. The war probably would have ended at First Manassas. I don't know. They actually extend over the hill. Their right flank is on the Mumma graveyard. So just to give you a sense of the scale of this. So it extends from over in the West Woods all the way over to the Mumma graveyard. 1,600 men in Jackson's, about 2,400 Lawton's division. Their back unit is Hayes' brigade, all Louisiana, Harry Hayes, all Louisianians. Whew, that's hard. And they're going to move north and try to fill in, try to support. You remember, 2 up, 1 back. And as they try to push in, they go face to face with the 12th Massachusetts. To me, it's an interesting story how you have the 12th Massachusetts, which is about as blue-blooded American regiment that you could ever have on this field. Their original commander was Fletcher Webster, Daniel Webster's son. He was killed at Second Manassas. And they go face to face with the Louisiana Tigers. One person said there were 37 different nationalities in this unit. It was formed from the brothels of New Orleans. A very rough crew. The New Orleans boys, the 1st Louisiana Tigers, gets the best of this engagement. The 12th Massachusetts has the highest percentage of casualties for any unit on this field. 62%. Highest percentage on the Union side. We're going to hear about Confederate side in a little bit. So basically what's going to happen is on both sides they're going to be surging back and forth as both sides try to hold and push their advantages. And so it's for the first hour that we're describing here, I'm kind of covering the first hour and a half of this battle. For the first hour, this ground is going to surge back and forth as both sides keep trying to push people in. But eventually the Union gets enough combat power, and as Dawes describes, they're going to be able to start pushing out. When the Wisconsin men, Dawes' men, arrive at that fence, our line appeared at the edge of the corn. A long line of men in butter and gray rose up from the ground. Simultaneously, there was a hostile battle lines, opened a tremendous fire upon each other. Men, I cannot say fell, they were knocked out of the ranks by the dozens. You read a lot of accounts of how it looked like these Confederates just rose up from the ground. The reason that is, there's high ground there where the house sits. You can see it drops off behind that. So as Douglas's men moved up, it looked as if they rose up from the ground. Think how intimidating that would have been. Marcellus Douglas in this action is wounded. He is literally falling backwards from his wound, and an artillery shell explodes underneath of him and throws him into the air, almost tears his leg off. He dies very soon thereafter. But they finally get some combat power, and they start to push out. Here's Dawes again. After a few rods of advance, the line stopped and by common impulse fell back to the edge of the corn and lay down on the ground behind a low rail fence. We all joined together, jumped over the fence and pushed out into the open fields. Phelps's brigade will move up to support, and they build enough combat power to start pushing out. The men are loading and firing with demoniacal fury and shouting and laughing hysterically, and the whole field before us is covered with rebels fleeing for their life. So about an hour to hour and a half into this, the 1st Corps, after surging, stalemating here,
You're welcome.
nice, starts to push out and drive the Confederates back. And as Dawes said, we pushed on halfway to the little church, which is where we're headed. The rest of this hike, we should have told you at the beginning. Sorry for that. We're going to walk down to the church, come up Smoketown Road, and start heading back. Okay, so it's 2 miles, really. 2 miles. About 2 miles. Mile south and a mile north. Of course, we stop a lot, you know. Talk more than we walk. So. I guess I should have told you it was 2 miles long before we started. Stonewall Jackson told E.H. Hill, his brother-in-law, before he's over in here. Jackson spends most of his time back in these woods. He said, told him right before the battle that God would protect him, and no harm would befall him. So another soldier said that Jackson was transformed from the job of battle. He was transformed. His men called him Old Blue Light, like piercing blue eyes that they said glowed in battle when he was at his best. So we have 4 brigades on this side of the road. The 2 are up at the fence. The other 2 are back here. Now, if you take out all of the trees in this open field, this was an open field. These trees were planted by the Philadelphia Brigade. They actually bought this 11 acres and put their monument here. We'll talk about some of that this afternoon. But this was an open field. And then the wood line of the West Woods, this bent back just like you see it in the back there, okay? So these 2 brigades are in the open, 2 and 2. Jackson, Winder, Tolliver, and Stark. And they're starting to fall back. You know, the lines are beginning to break. The First Corps advances are starting to drive these men back. Now commanding, this is Jackson's division, 1600. Commanding was John R. Jones. Jones is over in here. A shell explodes nearby and he leaves the field. That shell also killed Charles Behan on his 18th birthday. And so as these men are falling back, William E. Stark has to take over command when Jones leaves. Jones leaves another field later in the war, I think Chancellorsville, and then later dies of yellow fever. Somebody caught that one. So Stark takes over as the thing is falling apart. And Stark is going to lead the first counterattack of the morning, the first major counterattack of the morning. We're going to follow the second counterattack, but the first one's basically going to come from this line of trees, diagonally in that direction. Stark leading Stark and Tolliver's brigade. He said his target was the southwest corner of the cornfield. Now the Iron Brigade has advanced south in that open field. They're on the other side of that fence, headed south. They've pushed that line out. Lawton's men have all pulling back, and they're in that field heading south at the moment that Stark charges out. And this is going to lead to one of the most famous Antietam scenes or events I'm sure most of you are familiar with, is how the Iron Brigade turns to the fence as Stark's men push out, and they're basically fighting across the Hagerstown Turnpike, fence to fence.
But they're already flanked.
I'm sorry?
This charge is already flanked.
Well, because Battery B, as they move this way, that is
They're
correct.
already,
Yep.
they're already over, it's over to the left already.
Not going to last long. In fact, William E. Stark is shot with 3 bullets. He's dead within an hour. Stark is taken back to Hollywood Cemetery in Richmond, buried next to his son, who had been killed a couple of months earlier. So this counterattack is going to be very short. And you're right, as they advance in that direction, Battery B and Patrick's men are going to move up and catch them on the flank and rear. Just to give you a couple of numbers there. In Lee's Tigers, the 9th Louisiana, one of the companies had 18 men. 10 were killed and 8 were wounded. So Jones is stunned, Stark's killed, Williams takes over, he's wounded. The next commander, Stafford, he's wounded, and a colonel takes over.
Now there's a pretty famous picture that shows
Along the
number of
turnpike.
Confederates on the turnpike.
Piled up
Here,
on the fence.
Just a little bit farther north,
Okay.
right up here.
But it was on this side.
Absolutely, shooting this way.
Yeah.
Yep. The color bearer of the 1st Louisiana charges towards the fence, and as he gets to the fence, he's shot and killed, and the flag of the 1st Louisiana falls over the fence. It's literally draped. There was a fence on both sides of the road, and it drapes onto the fence. Now the flag, that cloth and thread, is more important than life itself. Every soldier that fought on this field and every other field of the American Civil War is going to march to his destiny with their flags leading the way. The flags provided the inspiration and the discipline to take one more step. And so it's the flags that are going to lead this counterattack. The color bearer is killed, the flag drapes on the fence. Well, right at that time, Phelps' brigade, supporting the Iron Brigade, is coming down. The 2nd United States Sharpshooters are literally coming down the road, hugging the fences. And Lieutenant Lewis Parmalee, he's 22 years old from Connecticut, sees the flag draped on the fence. The greatest prize of war would be to capture a battery or capture a flag. So he rushes forward to grab that flag. It's on the fence, it's right there! And he rushes forward to grab it, shot in the chest, he dies within an hour. Here's the letter that his commander had to write home. To me is given the painful task of informing you that your son Lewis was killed in the battle near this place on the morning of September 17th. He'd been leading the remnant of our little band after the colonel was wounded and had just been successful in taking a rebel color when he was struck by a ball in the arm and breast. He could not have lived but a short time. I assure you our deepest sympathies are yours, and we mourn the loss of a true soldier, a brave man who had fallen in nobly defending his nation's honor. Back to that photograph that I'm sure everybody has seen. Here along the turnpike, as one man said, the piles of dead were frightful. After the battle, a path had to be made by dragging the bodies off of it and placing them along the fences. Rufus Dawes, who would take over the 6th Wisconsin fighting here. Wow, that's good stuff.
This far away, you could feel the
Yeah, you could feel it. Yeah. You could feel it. Oh my gosh. One gun, 1 round, half charge. And the time, well, by this time, there's been 4 or 5, maybe 10,000 rounds fired. Rufus Dawes, he described where you're standing. The piles of dead on the Sharpsburg and Hagerstown Turnpike surpassed anything on any battlefield of my observation. The angle of death at Spotsylvania, the Cold Harbor slaughter pen, the Fredericksburg field where Sumner attacked were all compared by me when I saw them with this horrid land at Antietam. My feeling was that the Antietam Turnpike surpassed all in manifest evidence of slaughter. And we're an hour and a half into it. The Confederate initial lines have been pushed back. They've tried one major counterattack. Stark is killed, falls back. And, it looks like the Confederate left flank is about to collapse and crumble. Jackson's in big trouble. He needs help. And that's what we're going to follow, is that help on the way back. I'm going to wrap up this phase of this hike. One more quote from Hearts of 12th Massachusetts. Here's Julius Robardi. He's advancing as we did, right through that open field. North of the cornfield. His leg is broken in the cornfield by a shot. He's carried to a large tree over in the east woods. Here's what he wrote. Our troops advanced. Their firing was terrific. The corn stalks fell as if mowed. The air was full of explosions, the smell of brimstone. Missiles of all kinds strike the tree and dead branches fall among the wounded. I was shot through the right thigh by our own men. I was exposed to the fire of slavery and freedom. That's why we're all here, because this nation was exposed to the fire of slavery and freedom. A poor fellow uplifted his arms and begs for water. His arm is shot off. The man speaks no more. Another Confederate lays in front of me with a horrible wound. It is hell! I closed my eyes, was probably weak from the loss of blood, sick at the sight of such carnage. I became unconscious for a while. I remember nothing of that last struggle for possession of the cornfield. Well, that last struggle for the possession of the cornfield is going to start right about 7 a.m., which is where we're at in this battle. And to follow that attack, we still got to continue south, and then we're going to turn up the Smoketown Road.
Now, where's the 19th Indiana and 2nd Wisconsin? Have they made it up this far?
Yeah, up into that rock ledge. Well, I'll talk about it. Okay. What they're going to do is going to be on the south side, and it starts when this attack. They're going to come up and get behind the same ledge that the Virginians were and fire into the backs and flanks of Stark. They're where they come up.